I know, yeah. Looks better.
I'm going to speak in a very loud voice so that I can keep this going. I do apologize for anyone very far in the back that cannot hear me, but I'll do my best to project. Yes, I have never been told that I'm way too quiet. My name is Marva Wisdom, and I'm going to be your MC this evening. I am delighted to be here. It is quite an honor. And before we get started, what I want to begin with, I want to begin with acknowledgement of the land where we stand. This event, the Black Community Provincial Leaders Debate, acknowledging that it is on ancestral traditional territories of the Ojibwe, the Anishinaabe, and in particular, the Mississaugas of the New Credit, whose territory we are gathering on today. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties. And myself, as an immigrant, I am grateful and appreciative of the work and the stewardship of the Indigenous people of this land, and we continue to be grateful. We're grateful for their generations of stewardship over thousands of years, long before today, as we gather here on their land. We also recognize the contributions of the Métis, the Inuit, and other Indigenous peoples that have made both in shaping and strengthening this community in particular. And as a member of the Black community, we recognize that we have some successes and some celebrations together, but there are many challenges that we have that are quite similar, and some of which will be discussed here tonight. This recognition of the contributions of this historical importance of our Indigenous people must also be clearly and overtly connected to our collective commitment to make the promise and the challenge of truth and reconciliation real in all our communities, and in particular to bring justice for murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls across our country. And so the format for today, you already had some refreshments, I hope. This session is presented to you by Operation Black Vote Canada in association with the JCA, the Jamaican Canadian Association, opened their doors, and they have been an active part of this coordination and an active part of this community and the Black community as a whole. So please applaud. We also have a number of other organizations, including BAND, the Black Arts Network Dialogue. We also have the Ontario Black History Society. We have First Fridays. We have Generation Chosen. We have the Canadian Association of Urban Financial Professionals. We have Emcee. Okay, now I have my voice back. Thank you. We have the Black Health Alliance. We have the Black Business and Professional Associations, and a number of other organizations, including CBTU. So please give these organizations a round of applause coming together and making this happen. And Operation Black Vote, this is the first first leadership debate, isn't it?
It is.
So you guys have set the bar really high. Operation Black Vote will also be having its second annual Women's Political Summit June 9th, as well as Provincial Campaign Blitz, and it will be helping a lot of candidates as they go forward. We have some trailblazers here tonight. We also have some of the leaders in the current government, in the Liberal Party government of Ontario, and I'm going to ask them to stand. Minister Coteau, Michael, and Minister Emcee Hunter. We also have Mr. Grenville, or Mr. Grenville Anderson, member, right there as well. We have some trailblazers here tonight. We have a number of trailblazers. There are 3 that I have noted. And if you are a trailblazer and you're in the audience, I think we all are in some ways, but these folks have made their mark and have really blazed a trail for all of us. So Kamala Jean Gopi, Bev Salmon, who was the first city councilor, and Mr. LaRose. We thank you and we honor you for your commitment. We have numerous candidates here tonight, and you're going to have to take notes. I can't call out the names because we need time, right? We need time to hear from the Premier and others here. Please stand up if you are seeking the candidacy, or if you're a nominee, or if you're going to be nominated. Please stand up and be recognized for putting yourself on the line tonight. Thank you so much. One of the things that I wanted to talk about tonight is a wee bit about the Black Experience Project and provide an overview. I'm going to be very, very brief with that. I'm going to cut down everything I'm going to say by half so that you can hear more again from the Premier and Andrea Horvath, Leader of the Opposition, and certainly Mike Schreiner. And I wanted to share with you that yesterday my colleague and I had an opportunity to present the Black Experience Project to the annual general meeting of the Ontario Chiefs of Police. And for us, that was critical. I can tell you that we could hardly leave the room to catch my colleague's bus because they had so many questions and there's so many things that they're talking about in terms of how they want to do things differently. For me, that was a very hopeful sign, and so I just wanted to put that out there in terms of the Black Experience Project and what we're doing. The Black Experience Project is a project, for those who don't know, that was started in 2011. It was headed, Environics Institute initiated it. A number of organizations, including the Y, the United Way, the Diversity Institute, York University, all came together and pulled their resources and received some funding support from Trillium, from TD Bank, from the government, and from other organizations in order to make this happen. We had sponsorship from police services, we had sponsorship from regions, we had sponsorships from a broad cross-section of our community, as well as the Black community in collaboration, a lot of organizations and agencies who put their time and effort into this project. One person said, no research about us without us. And so with that in mind, we recruited many of our young people, many of our PhDs, many people in between to be a part of this Black Experience Project, not only to be participants, but also to make decisions around this project and how we're going to move forward in a respectful way, listening to the community. The first of its kind across the GTA, where we're looking at the lived experiences of the community as a whole. And there were 6 major themes that we pulled out. Now within these themes, there are also sub-themes. And so I'm going to share with you ever so briefly the 6 major themes. There were identity, and that is who we are as people and how we refer to ourselves. The community strength and engagement, and highlighted in that was our perseverance and our resilience and our contribution to the entire Canadian population. We also talk about politics, and one of the things that came out of that, the BEP participants are more engaged with their community and their organizations than the average Canadian for the most part. And we are even further engaged when we're involved in Black community or social organizations that focuses on the Black community. So politically, we are very, very engaged. And this confirms what has been said there. And for some participants, community and political engagement are directly linked to the experiences of dealing with racism, whether it be systemic or your everyday racism and discrimination that people find. There are also some great strengths within our community that were identified. We talk about our perseverance. We talk about what we've contributed to this community and to Canada. Unfortunately, when we were talking about institutional interpersonal racisms, the response around microaggression and how people are bothered by racism was great. And being bothered by racism really impacts on mental health and emotional health. I think we all know that. Education, police and the criminal justice, perspectives on Black youth, and Worlds Apart were the other themes. And please visit Black Experience Project if you want to learn more. In the interest of time, I will not get into the rest of it. And thank you for listening so that you know a little bit about some of the background work that helps to underpin some of the conversations we're having and why it's an imperative to act now. And so let's keep going. So the next item on the agenda is housekeeping. Does everybody know where the washrooms are? To the left, out the back, and there's at the side. And there's some food, refreshments back there. We're not asking you to all get up at once, but maybe at the end of the night, there will be some more for you.
Thank you.
What we're asking for you to do today is to turn your ears on, to really, really listen, provide an opportunity for others to be heard. And we're also going to ask you to keep your questions short. No paragraphs, no essays. There will be things that you might want to talk about later. Let's provide an opportunity for this many people to have a chance to be heard when we get to the question and answer period. The folks that are sitting here with you, -1, there was a criteria as to who was going to be participating in this debate. And the criteria was set, the threshold is that the 4 parties that had the provincial, the most per vote in terms of provincial received funding, and they are the individuals or the leaders that were invited here tonight. And we do recognize that there might be leaders in the room and folks that might want to run for political office or for the leadership, and perhaps it would be really great for Operation Black Vote to connect with you, but for now, there's a threshold and a criteria, and that is the reason. We just wanted to let you know that. And maybe I didn't articulate it as well, but you understand, I'm sure. And so let's now get to where we are in terms of Mr. Royson James is going to be moderating. Royson, I know you're here somewhere. Royson is a Toronto Star columnist who is currently a freelance contributor, and he writes about urban issues. He's been a longtime champion of this community and the community at large. We are delighted that tonight Royson is going to moderate the debate with our wonderful leaders, and thank you again for coming. Thank you, Royson. I will be back with you with the question and answer period, and look forward to seeing you then.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Welcome to the Black Community's Provincial Party Leaders Debate. Is this the first of the all-party debates in the 2018 Ontario Provincial Elections? And you are just really honored to be the first audience that our illustrious leaders will be debating before. This debate is live streamed, so we welcome our audience from around the world. also a warm welcome to Andrea Horwath, the leader of the New Democratic Party. Mike Schreiner, the leader of the Green Party. And Premier Kathleen Wynne, the leader of the Liberal Party. Sounds like when you introduce the various islands of the Caribbean and you get to Jamaica. Now, seeing that we're at the Jamaican Canadian Center, we're hoping that you have a catawampus time tonight, because whenever we have debate, you know, some type of bangarang is going to happen. We were expecting a lot more of that with if we had a particular candidate, but he decided to skip the debate tonight, so we'll just move on. Now, we begin the debate with opening remarks from the leaders. You each have a maximum of 5 minutes. Following the opening remarks, the moderator will pose a series of questions to the leaders. The debaters will have 90 seconds to respond to my questions and 60 seconds to respond to questions that come from you later on in the program. If required, we may have a 2-minute free-for-all if you guys want to engage on a particular issue, if that's okay with you. All right, and the last 30 minutes of today's debate will be reserved for you, the audience, to pose your questions. So we're giving you the alert now. You'll have about an hour to prepare your questions, because when you do pose your question, you will be given just 1 minute to provide the context to the question and the question. Okay, so let's prepare for that. So we begin with the opening remarks from the candidates in this order. For 5 minutes, Kathleen Wynne, followed by Andrea Horwath, and then Mike Schreiner.
Okay, there you go. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for doing this. Kudos to the organizers for putting this together, and to all of you for coming out. Thank you so much for being here, and it's great to be joined by 2 leaders. It's great to be here with you. So I have to say that it's great to be back in this room. I think the last time I was here at a breakfast club meeting with Emcee. And that was a number of years ago, and we were listening pretty hard to what people were saying to us about what needed to be done. And I hope that as we go through the evening, some of the people who were here that night will hear the echoes of what they said to us in terms of what we need to be doing as a society. But mostly when I look out at this room, what I think is that there are so many of you who have been engaged in a very long battle to remove barriers for yourselves, for your children, for your families. And so it's very humbling for me to be here, because I know how hard you've been working. And so I want to hear what you have to say tonight. I know that we're going to have an opportunity for a conversation. And we're doing a lot in our government, and I'm going to be talking about some of those things. But I want to just tell you a little bit about where I'm coming from, because you've been engaged in this battle for a long time, and by that I mean the battle to remove barriers and to create a society that allows everyone to have a fair shot at being successful. That's really what we're talking about. And I've been engaged in this at least since my kids were little, because I can go back. I don't know if Lloyd McKell's in the room, but there were people, Pat Case, Lloyd McKell, who I worked with long before I was in elected office, to make sure that the equity policies at the Toronto Board of Education were what they should be. And then I got involved because we were part of a society, part of a province where a government was taking equity out of the whole notion of education. And for me, publicly funded education was the battleground. And so when I became Minister of Education, when I was trustee, serving on the Toronto District School Board, I was one of the trustees who said, you know what, we should be gathering data. We should be finding out what's really going on, because there's some kids who are succeeding and there's some kids who aren't. And so I was trying to get that equity notion into our operations at the Toronto Board. It was also the time when the Harris government had put in place policies around student expulsion and suspension that were seriously disadvantaging Black kids in the system, and we were railing against that. So that work informed my work as Minister of Education when I became Minister of Education, and realized that the government, the Harris government, had literally taken the word equity out of all education documents. So there was no equity training going on. Kids weren't going to the equity camps that had been developed. There wasn't teacher training going on. So there was a whole, almost a decade where that work wasn't being done. And so my work as Minister of Education was to try to build that back, to put in place an equity policy in the school system that then got entrenched in legislation. And now as Premier, we are working to make sure that through our anti-racism directorate, and you know, I just want to acknowledge the NDP, because there was a secretariat when Bob Rae was the Premier of this province. And again, Harris removed that. And so we're building back that capacity in government. So that's the work that I've been engaged in. It's been really central. There's a last thing that I just want to say to you, because as I was thinking about tonight, and I was thinking about the stories that I have told and the work that I have done in talking with my colleagues, I wanted to just tell you that I've never in my life, I cannot remember a moment in my life or a time when I didn't know that there was systemic racism. And the question is why? Why is that the case for me? Because I can't remember, even as a little girl, not understanding that Black people were treated differently than white people. I knew that. The reason I knew that was that my mom grew up in the Bahamas. She grew up in Nassau. And she had a dad who came from Ireland, and he didn't buy into the structurally racist society in Nassau. And so I grew up as a kid in Richmond Hill, which was pretty white in the 50s and the 60s. And my mom basically let us know as kids that there were inequities in the world, it was unfair, and it was our job to find a way to remove those barriers. So that's the consciousness that I grew up with, and I didn't know as a little kid. I laughed to my mom because she was kind of an artist and she would teach us how to draw. I learned to draw palm trees. I'd never seen a palm tree, but she was drawing these trees, and I didn't know that I was getting a different grounding than other kids. I just share that with you because when people say today, well, systemic racism, and I've taken a lot of heat because I went and met with Black Lives Matter, and I acknowledged that systemic racism exists, and people said to me, well, you shouldn't be talking like that. Why are you painting this discussion with that broad brush? Because I've always known that systemic racism exists. That's not talking about one sector or another. That's a reality that we have to deal with as a society. You all know that. You've been working on this for years and years. I want to continue to work with you, to be your partner. Thank you so much for being here tonight.
Andrea, you're up.
Good sign. That's a good sign. Good evening, everyone. Good evening. How are you all doing? Good. Excellent. I want to say bonjour tout le monde and start by acknowledging, of course, as was already done, that we are meeting on the traditional territory of the Wendat, the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, Métis, and Mississaugas of the New Credit First Nation, rather, and I think Marva did an excellent job of tying together some of the struggles that Indigenous peoples and First Nations peoples face that are common with the struggles that you all face. Marva, thank you for that connection. I also want to thank Marva and Royson and all of the volunteers and all of the organizations involved in tonight's event. Thank you so much. This is an amazing, amazing opportunity. I especially want to thank the Jamaican Canadian Association, who is hosting this event tonight, and who delivers amazing programming, fantastic programming for people throughout the GTA. So thanks to the JCA. Of course, it's important for me as leader to acknowledge the NDP candidates that are with us tonight. So I'm going to say their names and they're going to stand up and we're going to give them a round of applause. Nikki Clark, Mahmoud Amin, Faisal Hassan, Marjorie Knight, Dwayne Morgan, Felicia Samuels, and our local candidate for this riding, Tom Rakosovic. I know how to take instructions. They told me I was behind a curtain. Is that better? Yeah. Thank you. I wasn't hiding under a barrel there. So as I was saying in my initial comments, tonight is an incredibly important evening, and I have to tell you how thrilled I am to be here. This election is about change, and it's not hard to see why. We live in a great province, a fantastic province, but today people are finding it harder to build their best life here. We live in a city full of opportunity, but too many people are just not sharing in the prosperity. And when people see governments that ignore this reality for years on end, institutions that continue to fail to change, and politicians who deliver nothing more than sound bites, well, it's no wonder that people become cynical about politics. But I believe it doesn't have to be this way. I absolutely believe it does not have to be this way. We can deliver change in Ontario. We can deliver the change that Ontario needs, and we can replace the cynicism and disappointment that people feel with a new sense of hope for the future. That's why I am running in this election, and that's what I'm hoping to deliver for the people of Ontario. I'm running to be the next premier of our province. Because I believe that change is not just possible, but that change for the better is absolutely on its way. And the only way to make that happen is to elect a new government that will work shoulder to shoulder with the entire Black community. This community is an absolute pillar of strength. You have a rich legacy of leaders who have built this province. In fact, I see someone entered the room a moment ago. I don't know where she ran to, but Zanina Conde is here, the first Black woman cabinet minister in the history of our country. A rich legacy of leaders who have built our province, and a new generation of activists who are leading the effort to say that we cannot settle for the status quo. I agree. We cannot settle for a province where Black families are still more likely to live in poverty. We cannot settle for allowing Black children to continue to be disproportionately represented in the child welfare system. We cannot settle for allowing Black men and youth to continue to be overrepresented in the criminal justice system in our province. And we can never, ever put the responsibility for change onto the shoulders of the Black community alone. The next premier of our province has such an important job to do in delivering the change that we need. And that's why my platform will include a new Ontario Anti-Racism Fund. We're going to support the community organizations that are doing the hard work on the ground to fight racism and foster equity. We're going to invest $20 million because sound bites don't end racism, action does. I believe the next premier must stop arbitrary and discriminatory policies, and that means ending carding, period. The next premier must work to reconcile the injustices of generations of anti-Black racism and make sure that the Anti-Racism Directorate has the resources it needs to do good work, because it should have been doing that work since the 90s, and we only just got started again about 2 years ago. Not good enough. but we're going to make sure that organization has the resources it needs. The next Premier must work to ensure that Black families have equal access to good jobs with good wages and decent benefits, to make sure that Black Canadians don't face discrimination when you submit a resume or go for a job promotion. And the next Premier must empower young people by putting a stop to discriminatory streaming in our schools. You know, over the last 5 years, 48% of the students that were expelled from the Toronto District School Board were Black. Just 10% were white. Totally unacceptable. Let's call it what it is. It is a product of anti-Black racism in our school system. We can do so much better than that, sisters and brothers. We can do so much better than that. We can end harmful streaming in schools. We can dedicate ourselves to the systemic change that we need. We can fully acknowledge the contributions of Black Canadians in our education system and in our history books, where it should have been all along. And we can do so much more to celebrate and promote Black communities' contributions throughout our province. You've worked so hard for so long to change Ontario for the better, and now it is time for a new Premier who works just as hard to deliver change for the better that you and that Ontario need. This is the job that I'm running to do. I look forward to doing it with you. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup. Miigwech, sisters and brothers.
So just a reminder, opening remarks are 5 minutes. so Mike, no, you're under pressure. So that last one was 7.5 minutes. So our timekeeper is right down front. So at the 4-minute and 30-second mark, please wave. Okay? Thank you very much. Okay, Mike.
Thank you. I'll keep to my time, hopefully. I want to thank all of you for being here tonight. It says so much to see such a great crowd out. And Marva, I just want to thank you for that beautiful land acknowledgement, because I think now more than ever in today's world, we need an Indigenous worldview, and we think about the decisions we make, how they affect our children, our grandchildren, the next 7 generations. I want to thank all the organizers. I especially want to thank Royson James for not only your amazing columns, but for being our moderator tonight. And if I could do a quick shout out to my fellow Guelphite, Marva Wisdom, our host tonight, thank you. I want to thank both the Premier and NDP leader, Andrew Horwath, for being here tonight as well. And I sincerely, and I mean this, I sincerely wish all 4 party leaders were here tonight. And the reason being is this conversation is too important for anyone to skip. And in many respects, I hope tonight is less about a debate and more about a conversation about how we make Ontario a better place. Because after all, as the leaders of Ontario's 4 major political parties, our job is to listen to you, the community. And as you, go ahead. And as you can see, none of those of us at this table, nor the person not missing from this table, none of us have experienced what it's like to live as a Black person in Canada. We don't have to deal with carding or profiling. We don't have to deal with the systemic racism that is part of the Black experience in Ontario. And I want to acknowledge my privilege as a white man. And I want to look forward to hearing from the people in this room to find out what matters to you. And I look forward to being asked the tough questions, because we need real answers. And I will say that as we as Greens, and I just want to do a quick shout out to our Green candidates over here, if you would like to stand up, please. I will say we as Greens have put social justice at the heart of what we do. We seek to find ways to connect to and be allies with the people of color in this city and across this province fighting for justice. We will work with others to build a truly inclusive Ontario. And we recognize that our province has a long way to go. Greens in Ontario and around the world believe in doing politics differently, in building consensus, not tearing each other down. We believe in proposing win-win solutions, not playing wedge issue politics. We believe that politics should be about putting people first, not about well-connected donors, not about lobbyists or political insiders, but about people. I encourage you to visit gpo.ca/vision and look at our Green Vision book that provides ideas and solutions to a broad range of challenges this province faces and offers ideas of how we can solve them together. Our vision talks about how we will fight for jobs that put people and planet first, how we can improve people's lives by eliminating poverty, by delivering on a basic income guarantee, how we will make sure that everyone in Ontario has a place that they can afford to call home, how we will connect our communities, go ahead, please, how we will connect our communities with affordable public transit, and how we can improve health care by promoting health, not just treating illness. Our Green Vision shows how we can leap into the future now to create the jobs of the 21st century by making our businesses and buildings more energy efficient, innovative, and clean. It talks about how we can protect the people and places in this province that we love by embracing a pathway to 100% renewable energy in our children's lifetime. But we can't leap into this future if some people are left behind due to racism. And so that's why we have to work so hard to demand that a culture shift in our police forces that is real, profound, and permanent. We have to create economic opportunities for everyone, especially Black youth. And we must make sure our education system treats everyone with fairness, dignity, and respect. And so together, we can change the status quo in Ontario. Together, we can bring people-powered change to this province to create an inclusive society that benefits everyone. And I look forward to working with you to deliver that change to Queen's Park. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, the first question is directed to Kathleen Wynne. That'll be followed by Andrea Horwath and then Mike. You will have 2 minutes each to respond. I noticed that each one of you acknowledged the presence of anti-Black racism. And in 2013, the United Nations General Assembly proclaimed 2015 to 2024 as the International Decade for People of African Descent. Right. With that in mind, what do you see as some of the most pressing struggles and latent opportunities in the province's African Canadian communities? And if elected, what would you do to address these concerns?
Thank you, Royson. And I've been working with my colleagues, Michael and Emcee and McKinney and Granville and Lisa, and much of the work that we have begun is an acknowledgement of the realities that are underpinned by the United Nations Decade for the People of African Descent. We acknowledge that in our government, and the work that the Anti-Racism Directorate is set up to do, and you know, it works across government. So there's $47 million, for example, going into 74 community organizations to do the work in community to facilitate better outcomes for young people, for families, and so continuing to tackle those issues, whether it's education, because Black kids are overrepresented in the kids who don't graduate from high school, preventing kids from getting involved with the criminal justice system, because as has been noted, there's an overrepresentation of Black people in our corrections service. And so that is the work that we are doing right now. And the Anti-Racism Directorate is tasked with working across government to make sure that we are gathering the data so that we define the problems that we know have to be defined, and then we find the solutions and target the resources as we are now, but we can do more of that, whether it's in health, whether it's in education, whether it's in child welfare. Target the resources to solve the problems that have been quantified. The gathering of that data is going to be critical in being able to resolve many of the issues that you have been tackling for so many years. So that's the work that we will continue to do if I am re-elected as Premier. Thank you.
Andrea?
Thanks, Royson. Look, I don't disagree with what the Premier is talking about. There's certainly some work that's been done, and after June 7th, should I have the honor of being the Premier of this province, we certainly won't get rid of the good work that's going on, but we know there's a lot more work that needs to happen. Look, we are now in 2018. You know, the Premier talked about her life experience and her exposure to systemic racism as a young girl. I mean, everyone in this room is experiencing that today. I mean, when I go onto university campuses and hear young women talk about the daily microaggressions that they have to deal with and then try to hold their chin up and continue in on their studies, it should not be happening. When I have meetings, roundtable discussions with community-based leaders in this community who are frustrated because yet again, some politicians asking them to tell their story when the story's been told many times for decades, it's getting a bit old. And so what we need to do is not only the work that the Premier is talking about, but we need to engage the grassroots community groups that are doing so much on the ground work and make sure that we're giving them the resources they need to make daily change in their communities. We need to deal with the trauma that's happening in neighborhood after neighborhood and make sure we're providing resources to help families, to help youth, to help colleagues at school deal with the trauma that occurs too often in our neighborhoods in this city. But we also have to look at the makeup of government, the makeup of every government department, the makeup of every board and commission. Why is it that those places still do not reflect the community when it comes to who is sitting on those boards and commissions? And those boards and commissions are always appointed by the sitting government. So yes, there are things that we need to do to deal with the things I talked about already, and we are determined to do those things. And so whether it's the work that the New Democrats did to name carding for what it was and then take it on in the legislature with Jamaican, or whether it's the work that we continue to do with you, we'll be there shoulder to shoulder fighting with you on these struggles.
Thank you. Mike?
So I think one of the biggest things we have to do is remove the barriers to success. Remove the barriers that are preventing people from achieving what they want to achieve their dreams. First of all, we have to eliminate carding. Like what I have heard from members of the community, what people are telling Justice Tulik as he does his report on carding is that the current restrictions are not good enough. Carding is still happening, and the data that was collected from carding needs to be destroyed so that data is never used against people. Second, it's absolutely critical, particularly in today's world, that everyone has an opportunity to achieve educational opportunities. And the fact that we thought we had ended streaming in this province in the 1990s, but the fact that I have so many people of color tell me their children are still being streamed out of academic programs, out of the areas in which they can succeed, that far too many black students are being sent home or suspended at rates that are completely unacceptable. It's those kinds of changes that have to happen at the community level, at the ground level, to help people succeed. But because there are some huge opportunities that people can seize. And one of those is helping repower our communities with local energy. You know, one of the people I find so inspiring is Van Jones, who is one of President Obama's economic advisors, and is taking black youth and putting solar panels on roofs and retrofitting homes and creating black-owned businesses in communities, powering those communities and generating economic wealth for communities. That's the kind of economic development I want to see in Ontario, economic development that the black community controls so they can generate, so you can all generate prosperity and we can all generate prosperity together.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you. So let's go straight to education. And the question will first be answered by Andrea, then Mike, and then Kathleen. If you discovered that only 7 students out of every 10 were graduating from high school, and barely half of those who graduate do so with subjects and grades that do not qualify them for university, that 42% didn't even apply to go to university or college, and of those who applied to university, only 1 in 4 were accepted. Now, faced with those crushing statistics, would you not declare this a provincial crisis in education and demand improvement? Well, those are the stats for black students in the Toronto District School Board in 2011, and the lived experience of blacks across the province. Of every 100 black students slated to leave high school, only 69 graduate. Of those, only 18 end up in university or college. The numbers are worse for black boys. Meanwhile, half the student expulsions are black kids. As Premier of Ontario, what do you plan to do about this abject failure of our schools to educate black students?
Thank you for the question, Royson. And I think the very first thing that you have to do is admit that there is a problem. And I don't think that admission has been clear enough here in the province of Ontario. Look, we know the stats. Royson has, repeated them for us once again. But we don't see the change happening. We don't see the change happening. These stats aren't new. It's not like this is something new that the community is facing. In fact, I'd suggest that it's been getting worse and not better, and that's absolutely unacceptable. And so we need to name the problem as we've obviously done, but we need to make sure that we are dealing with the curriculum in our schools, the processes in our schools, the supports that our students need to make sure that the successes are there. And that means that, when kids go to school, they should see some black teachers teaching them too. And absolutely. And when you're dealing with a student who might be presenting with some challenges, then the response shouldn't be to kick them out. It should be to sit and talk with them about what's going on in their lives and what stresses and problems their families might be facing. And we know that, unfortunately, we continue to see black people with higher representation in the ranks of people living in poverty in our province. That continues to be a problem. So that's why we've brought forward ideas to help support families. Things like true dental care for everyone, real prescription drug coverage for everyone, decent jobs, decent opportunities for young people. We have a plan for more co-op placements, for example. We need to get young people into the trades, exposed to the opportunity of the trades. We need to make sure that young black children and youth feel like they belong, like they have worth, and like they can succeed and achieve. And that means more supports and funding in our schools, not cutbacks, and it means making sure that we're doing that hard work to give those kids a fighting chance.
Thank you, Mike.
Yeah, Royson, those statistics, you know, which we all know, just shows to me how much the status quo is failing our young people, and particularly Black students, and especially Black young men. And it has to change. And so one of the reasons I got involved in politics and chose probably the hardest path to getting elected you could choose was to change the status quo and to fight to change the status quo, because those statistics are completely unacceptable. And so we have to mandate anti-racism, anti-discrimination, and anti-harassment training in all of our schools for all of our school staff, so that everyone can go to school and be treated with dignity and respect. We have to, when our students graduate from secondary school and move on to college or university, we need to make sure the financial resources are available for them to succeed, to access higher education. Then we need to make sure that we have the proper apprenticeship training, co-op programs in place to transition those young people into the jobs of the 21st century. And if you go to our vision book, we have a complete outline detailing how we can create those economic opportunities and how we can ensure that our schools have the resources they need to provide the services that our students need. And it's one of the reasons that we've taken the position that we have to start talking about how we get our school boards working together, so that we don't spend resources on things like duplicate administration, busing, and buildings, and we actually invested in our kids' classrooms, ensuring that we have the teachers they need, the mental health supports they need, the educational assistance they need to succeed.
So there is absolutely no doubt that there is more structural change that's needed. There's absolutely no doubt. You know, we've put in place the first ever Education Equity Action Plan. We recognize that there is more training, more mentorship that is needed for teachers, for kids, to help them to know what the opportunities are, and to help them to be exposed to all of those opportunities. The Ontario Black Youth Action Plan is about those organizations on the ground helping kids, not just with community activities, but helping them to find a pathway to success that includes education. And so the money, the $47 million that we're putting into those supports is part of that. $116 million that's being targeted for mental health supports for kids from racialized communities. The raising of the minimum wage, making sure that families have childcare. All of those initiatives they're poverty reduction issues, they're economic development issues, and it's about making sure that every family in this province has the access that they need, but the Black community in particular, Black communities, that they see the pathways and that they have the supports in the schools and in the community, because those things are connected. The school's not an island. We have to make sure that we're working both in the school, in the community, so that kids feel and see that pathway to success. One of the things that we did early on was put student success teachers in schools, but I think what we need to look at now is, are those teachers getting the training that they need? Do they have the cultural competencies that they need? And that goes for the child welfare system as well as the education system. All of that work is underway right now.
You do know that whatever you're doing isn't working.
I
right?
said, absolutely. I get that.
And
That's it, Royson.
the question sort of suggests that the people who are responsible for a school system, do they have a sense of urgency and that this is a ridiculous situation and this is really a provincial emergency?
Well, Royson, I think, well, I take it you're asking me that question.
Well,
As the-
you or whoever wants to jump in.
Yeah, well, I mean, the fact is that we've been in government, and I get that there is a huge frustration, and I feel that frustration, you know, because we have been putting,
15 years.
I get that's going to be Andrea's theme. I get that, Andrea. You're going to say that
I have more
a million
themes than
times.
that,
I get
Kathleen.
that.
I have more themes.
But the reality is that I got into this business because our education system had been stripped by the previous government. We've been building it up. I know there's more to be done. I know that we're not there. We've got huge problems. But the fact is that we are tackling these problems head on. You know, free tuition is part of tackling the issues that kids don't have access to post-secondary. Okay,
You're right.
okay. Free and almost free and sometimes better than free tuition. Depends where you are. So,
Not free.
So here's the thing. There's why can't we just stop streaming at schools?
Exactly.
Why can't we just have the educational assistance and supports that people need to help the teachers support the kids in the classroom? You know, why don't we have a social worker in every school? Why don't we have arts programs in every school to make sure that children can explore all of their gifts? We should have those things. We should have those things in schools. And so, yes, there are many ways I think that we can improve on what's been happening in this province. New Democrats are dedicated to doing that. Our platform's coming out very, very soon, and it is a transformational document that really does focus, on the change we need.
Thank you very much.
Change for the better.
Let's move on now to another stubborn issue, this criminal justice system.
Yeah.
By most measures, black people and other racialized and indigenous peoples are being killed, surveilled, and overrepresented in the criminal justice system. Recent data shows that black people in jail waited longer for trial than white people charged with the same offense, sometimes close to twice as long. Carding is still a sore point, as some of you have mentioned before. Police